once again. Good morning. Thank you. My name is Everett Gillison. I'm the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety, also the Mayor's Chief of Staff. I want to welcome you here to what we call West is Best, those of us from West Philadelphia. So thank you all for being here and actually to attend to something that is not only pressing, but something of a conversation that's long overdue. I want to thank the United States Transportation Secretary Anthony Foxx for being here. Please acknowledge him. Obviously, we're here talking about My Brother's Keeper Summit and what we hope to get out of today. We're going to be working in partnership to address one of the greatest challenges facing our city. How can we put the next generation of young men on track for success? And that's why each of you are here today. We brought together a very distinguished and a diverse coalition of partners from the private sector, public sector, nonprofits, clergy, community organizations, families, and yes, especially young people. We are each connected to work and address the challenges through our own networks, communities, and partners. But we don't have time to continue working in silos. We do not have time to sit back and just talk. We have to work collaboratively to address all of the issues that are in front of us in order to really get and make any progress. So today you're going to hear a couple of things. First, you're going to hear about where we are and what we are currently doing, some of the programs that are already in existence dealing with the policies and initiatives, not only of this administration, but across the sectors. But what we need your help to understand is, A, where are the gaps? B, who's missing from this table? Who's missing from the discussion that needs to go on? C, how can we work better together? And D, how can we actually obtain and make a dent in what needs to be a long, consistent effort to eradicate this issue? Shortly, you will hear from Secretary Foxx regarding the MBK challenge on the national level, and Mayor Nutter will be up regarding how we are responding locally. And we're going to hear from Juan Jeffries, who's participating in our Power Corps PHL, and how this program that we have in the city is affecting his life. Then we're going to end up breaking into 6 groups. Have 6 particular goals that you're going to be asked to concentrate on and actually give your best efforts in order to address. This is where your input, where your expertise and your recommendations are really going to make a difference. Again, we're not just asking you to sit and listen. This isn't sermonette time. This is actually an opportunity to work on the goals and your active participation in determining the next steps that will impact the lives of boys and men in color in Philadelphia. We're going to be working from 9 to about 3. I just want to remember, but at 3 o'clock, that's not the end. That's just the beginning. We will be in contact to both download everything that everyone has done. You're going to end up getting that information, and then you're going to continue that discussion and what our collective responsibility is towards achieving the goals that we set before us. So it's my pleasure at this time to just not only kick this off, but to introduce a person who you all know, that this is near and dear to his heart, that we've been working on this for a number of years together, but it is the Mayor of the City of Philadelphia, Michael Nutter. Please welcome him.
Deputy Mayor Gillison, thank you very, very much. As much as the Deputy Mayor said, and certainly it's true, that all of these issues are near and dear to my heart, I think you can also tell from his opening and his own presentation that these issues are most pertinent and significantly important to the Deputy Mayor as well. He's Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and the Chief of Staff. Can we please recognize Everett Gillison and the great work that he's doing? our city. I have a bit of a dual role here at the moment. I have a number of folks that I need to recognize. I'm going to introduce the Secretary, and then I'm going to come back for some remarks of my own. And so, even though the Deputy Mayor has already asked us to do this, you know, you can never over-warmly welcome a Secretary from President Obama's administration. And we pride ourselves in the fact that we have probably had more cabinet secretaries from President Obama's administration in Philadelphia probably than any other city except Washington, D.C., where they work. And so please, one more time, a warm Philadelphia welcome to U.S. Transportation Secretary Anthony Foxx. Some of the folks who are a part, and you know, I mean, I could spend all morning recognizing a lot of different people, but some of the folks who are directly involved on the administration's behalf with regard to my brother's keeper, and those are Desiree Peterkin-Bell, our Director of Communications and Strategic Partnerships, also, of course, the City Representative, Christine Piven, who's our Second Deputy Chief of Staff, Katie Wolfgang and Julia Helengas from SERV Philadelphia. Katie is our Chief Service Officer for the city. Erica Atwood and Morris Hobson, who are from the Office of Black Male Engagement. Maya Giacomowitz, Katie Martin, and David Tuzio out of our policy office. Mari Porter, who is our Chief Grants Officer for the city, and Mary Horstman and Mitch Little, and of course Eva Gladstein from CEO. Please recognize all those folks. Mr. Secretary, we have virtually every department commissioner and director of a variety of agencies from our city government. As I've said on a number of occasions, this one is an all hands on deck. Every department and agency in our city government has a role to play in the My Brother's Keeper initiative and our efforts to respond to President Obama's call and challenge to cities all across America. And of course, we responded very, very quickly. I'm going to bring Secretary Foxx up in a second. Let me tell you a few things about him. In 2013, Anthony Foxx was appointed to the cabinet position after serving as the mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina, since 2009. I, of course, got to know then Mayor Foxx very, very well through our work together at the U.S. Conference of Mayors. When he was mayor, which he will say later on in his life and in his book, which was the best job he ever had, as mayor, he directed many innovative projects to enhance public transportation in and around Charlotte, and these investments became the centerpiece of that city's job creation and economic recovery efforts. Now, as Transportation Secretary for the United States, Secretary Foxx leads an agency with more than 55,000 employees and a $70 billion budget that oversees air, maritime, and surface transportation, with the goal, of course, of ensuring that the United States has the safest and most efficient transportation system in the world. I know he has a great deal of experience focusing on efficiency and innovation, because that's what mayors do. We get things done. We make things happen. So I think there is no better representative from the White House to join us today to discuss one of President Barack Obama's signature initiatives, My Brother's Keeper, than our good friend, the Transportation Secretary for the United States of America, Secretary Anthony Foxx.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's great to be here in Philadelphia. I must make a confession to my good friend, Mayor Michael Nutter, one of the great leaders in our country, that less than 48 hours ago, I happened to be in Moline, Illinois, stuck trying to make my way to South Dakota, where the weather was terrible, and I had an opportunity to watch a football game. Let's just say that the Carolina Panthers made my job easier
by allowing me to gracefully welcome myself to the city, because they gave you all a wonderful victory on Monday. Notice my verb. Let me also say that the purpose of our presence here today, together, could not be more important. We've been talking about the crisis affecting young men of color for decades. Their place in America. And in fact, if you go back more than 100 years, Frederick Douglass himself was asked to give advice to struggling young black Americans. And I think the reason we're continuing to have this discussion even a century later is that when we look at the progress that was made during the civil rights movement, and even the general narrative of history, we recognize that the narratives often don't match up. That opportunities for these young men haven't expanded as fast or as wide as it should have. We can look at the statistics. That children of color are 9 times likelier than white children to grow up in poverty. That right now there are more black men in prison today than were in slavery on the eve of the Civil War. You know about these statistics. That's why you're here. You also know about it because these trends have continued in many cases for years and years and years. And that's what my brother's keeper is trying to address. Reversing these trends and using the collective energy of all of our people to the collective and constructive good for the country. President Obama is calling on the country saying, we must fix this. We must repair the lives of your men and reclaim them and bring them back into the mainstream and give them a shot at the American dream. And today we're charged with answering the question, how? So a few months ago in February, I was traveling with the president, and we were riding in a car, and he sort of stopped the conversation and said, tell me about your father. And I was a bit surprised, then began to tell him that I was born in 1971 to a 19-year-old college sophomore who had to withdraw from school and move back home to raise me. She finished school and went on. I stayed with my grandparents for most of my life growing up. And as we got to talking more and more, he ended the conversation by saying, we've got to tell our story. Because there are so many men, young men of color, who are walking around Philadelphia today thinking that they are living a life that no one else has lived, walking pathways no one else has walked. And then I think about why it is I'm standing here today. And I can think back to people who influenced me growing up, those hands that lifted me up when I needed it. Someone like Mel Watt, who's now the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, who grew up with a dirt floor and no bathroom in his home. His father left the family when they were young. He was raised by a mother, and when he saw me coming along, spending time with his kids, he adopted me as one of his, raising my prospects and making me think that I could do more than was right in front of me. You know, our ability to reach back and help our young men is in direct proportion to the energy and the vitality we put on that task. And what President Obama is really calling us to do is to not leave this generation of young men behind, to pick them up and help carry them forward so that the opportunities that could be available to them if they work hard and do the right things can come into their lives and lift their ambitions and enable them to create a pathway for the generations to come. Now, there are a lot of open questions as My Brother's Keeper continues to evolve. And quite frankly, in every place, the story is going to be a little different because local leaders will have to develop strategies tailored for each community. And I know Mayor Nutter very shortly is going to share his ideas. But I'm here because I think that no matter where we're talking about implementing My Brother's Keeper, there's a particular mindset, a kind of way of thinking that can help us tackle this challenge. To understand what I'm saying, I use the words of Adam Clayton Powell, the former congressman from Harlem, who defined freedom in the following way. He said, you know, freedom is an internal achievement rather than an external adjustment. It's an internal achievement rather than an external adjustment. Meaning that the individual must make a decision to live free. And that the external forces acting on that person's life will bend to the will of the individual. You know, I was just talking to Juan over here, who you'll meet in a second, who's got an incredible story, but he was channeling Adam Clayton Powell because I said, what made the difference in your life? And he said, me. I made the difference in my family. And I look forward to hearing more of his story. But for all of us, if we want to reach young men of color and help them reach their potential, any external adjustment has to come along with internal achievement. I'll tell you what I mean. One last story from my life in the South. My grandfather was a high school principal before I was born. When the schools desegregated, he became a math teacher in 7th grade, but before then he'd been a principal. When I first ran for office, I was campaigning and I met a man who was about late 60s, early 70s. He said, I got to tell you a story about your grandfather. I said, okay. And he proceeded to tell me that my grandfather helped him fill out his college applications when he was in high school. I said, wow, that's really interesting. And he went on to say, yeah, but I got into college, I couldn't pay for it. So your grandfather helped me fill out my college financial aid applications. And I said, that's great. And then he said, you know, but he went further than that because when I got my scholarship, I had to go three hours away to sign the paperwork, and I had no way to get there. Young man who had never had anybody in his family go to college, had never had experience filling out an application, never had experience filling out financial aid forms, and he had no way to go to get the funding. So he said, your grandfather handed me the keys to his car. And I drove three hours away, and I was able to get that scholarship. And he said, you know what the best part is? I wouldn't be a surgeon today if it hadn't been for your grandfather. So My Brother's Keeper perhaps is a new initiative, but it relies on sort of the old way of doing things, doing everything we can to help all of our young men achieve their dreams and ambition, and expecting that when we do that, they will return the effort, whether it's working harder in school, working harder on a job, or taking care of their families, including their children. That's the deal my brother's keeper is trying to restore. So fundamentally, what we're here to do is to do what happened in that little high school back in North Carolina. We're trying to give our young men the keys to their future. And so with that, I want to thank you very much. I look forward to what comes out of here in Philadelphia. And I know that many, many young men walking around Philadelphia today are going to be impacted by the work you do. And I charge you to do it well. Thank you.
Secretary Foxx, thank you again very, very much. Thanks for sharing part of your story. And I try to encourage folks all the time here in Philadelphia, other places that I go, to tell your story. Everyone has a story. Everyone has a story to tell. And part of that education for our young people, all of which is not going to take place in a classroom, is the shared experience, the ups and the downs, the successes and sometimes the failures. But as they say, it's not how many times you get knocked down. It's that you get back up. And that is the true testament. And so I want to thank Secretary Foxx for his remarks. He is going to be here for a little while, but as you can imagine, as the Secretary of Transportation for the United States of America, he's got a fairly busy schedule. At some point in time, he may have to leave, and we understand that. So I'm going to ask you to give him another big round of applause and thank him for his presence. By plane, train, or boat, he could be anywhere, and he decided to be here in the city of Philadelphia. All of us want the best for our children and their lives. Our general goal is to make sure that they have the opportunities that maybe we didn't have, or to strive and go farther, to achieve their own personal goals, and certainly to dream big. And any one of us certainly wishes that for our children and for other people's children. Of course, we can't stop with our own individual families. It's a much broader family. There's a collective responsibility to all of our children to help ensure that they have the opportunities, that they have a pathway to success, that they have the guidance and support, as the Secretary was talking about his grandfather and that young man, that they have the support they need, and we wrap our arms around them, sometimes literally. However, we also know that our children, and particularly men and boys of color, face a series of unique challenges and obstacles and roadblocks, in many instances not of their making, and in some instances of their making. Now, we've had a lot of time to identify the problems. Now we need to be focused more on solutions. Communities all across America are working together to help all of our children succeed. And we all know that by working together, we can in fact remove systemic barriers and also implement strategies that we know work and that we can actually improve the outcomes of our young people's lives. Dr. King talked on many, many occasions about this sense of community, this collective responsibility, and certainly one of his more famous responses to that was that we're tied together in a single garment of destiny, caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. And we know this from our shared experiences. It's my personal view that it is, in fact, the role of a freely elected democratic form of government to address the biggest problems facing our citizens and provide solutions for those who are vulnerable in our communities. And we have many vulnerable people and young people and children in our communities. We know for a fact that education will, in fact, provide for a better life. It is, in fact, a pathway away from negative influences that cause so many of our young people, particularly men and boys, to struggle. High-quality education can, in fact, equip a young person with the tools to overcome the challenges of poverty, crime, incarceration, and poor health, make a better life for themselves and eventually for their families. And so that's why one of the many goals proposed by President Obama's and the White House's My Brother's Keepers initiative focuses on education, from early childhood through college, and from college to career. Education is one of the greatest tools ever for equality. It does, in fact, help to level the playing field. We also know for a fact, and we certainly know here in Philadelphia, that every child does not have access to a high-quality education. It's the responsibility of adults, citizens, and elected officials to make sure that those resources are there and provided. We know that children who attend school less than 80% of the time have a 10 to 20% chance of actually graduating. In Philadelphia, 64% of our school district 12th graders graduate from high school. Since 2007, yes, that rate, from 2007 to now, that rate did go up, but not enough. And among men and boys of color, the graduation rate, unfortunately, is actually less than 50%. Clearly, we're not giving them enough tools that they need to be successful adults. And so we're really here to answer a couple questions. What is the challenge, and what are we doing here? We have to confront them, identify solutions, and then work together. Sounds relatively simple. It's not that easy. The My Brother's Keeper Community Challenge, as described by Secretary Foxx, seeks to engage cities and communities across the country in a number of goals. Making sure that children enter school ready to learn and that are reading at grade level by third grade. That our young people graduate from high school and that they're ready then to complete post-secondary education or training. That youth who are out of school are employed or looking for work, and that our young people remain safe from crime at all levels. These are pretty straightforward, common sense, basic goals. They're not revolutionary ideas, but just as you cannot run before you can walk, we can't progress as a nation until all of our children have the opportunity to accomplish these and many other milestones. In Philadelphia, we would not be here where we are today and some of the progress we've made without the dedication of people like Dr. Leon Sullivan, Cecil B. Moore, and so many, many others whose names and reputations we recognize and respect. So many have struggled so hard and labored so long to build a foundation upon which we can build on today and tomorrow. Equal rights are actually built on generations, not just a few years. I didn't arrive in City Hall on day one and revolutionize everything that we do. It does take time, but we have to use our time wisely. Time is a precious resource. No one has ever been able to figure out how to put more time on the clock. You cannot fix yesterday. You can only do something about today and tomorrow going forward. I don't care who you are. I don't care where you're from. No one has ever been able to put more than 24 hours on a clock. No one. We also can't do it alone. We know that as well. And so President Obama and the My Brother's Keepers Taskforce, they recognize this, which is why we have groups all across the United States, just like we're here today, working together to address these challenges. No one person or group can tackle these problems without the help and coordination and dedication of others, a number of groups that I mentioned earlier today. Let me refresh our collective memories a little bit about our own city. In Philadelphia, our poverty rate is now at 26%. It was 28%. But even at 26%, it is still the highest of the top 10 cities in the United States of America. The national average is 15%. Our CEO office is now looking at models for what would happen in our city if we went from 26 to 24 or even down to 20, and the ripple effect that that would have all across the city of Philadelphia. From a human standpoint, from an economic standpoint, we have to talk about these things in concrete terms. Yes, I want the poverty rate to go down, but I also want people to understand what that means when that happens and how it impacts lives. Young men of color are deeply affected by poverty. Those under the age of 24, 35% of black males, 39% of Asian males, 47% of Latino males live in poverty. And living in poverty clearly affects educational attainment. 51% of Latino men and 46% of African American males do not graduate from high school in this city. It is virtually impossible in the 21st century to take care of yourself or your family without a high school diploma, and even that still makes it tough if you've not taken on some post-secondary educational opportunity. This is a very, very different world than the 1950s and 60s. But I don't want us to just focus on statistics, because we're not just talking about statistics. We're talking about real people, real individuals. They have names. They have a face. They live in a neighborhood. You see them every day. You walk past them. You walk around them. You may not speak to them. They are real people, and we ignore them at our peril. It's not just about the stats. The stats create a framework. There are real people behind those numbers. They matter. They're not going anywhere. They're here. We have to meet people where they are and their life circumstance. So we're doing a few things. We have more to do. You know that earlier this year I signed an executive order, which was subsequently turned into a piece of legislation, to raise the minimum wage for companies that do business with the city of Philadelphia directly. We immediately raised the minimum wage to $10.88 per hour, and on January 1st, And on January 1st, 2015, it will immediately become $12 an hour for any company doing business with the city of Philadelphia. We reconvened and reinvigorated the Mayor's Commission on African American Males, which was originally created by the first African American mayor of our city, of course, Mayor W. Wilson Goode Sr. We created the Shared Prosperity Plan to implement a comprehensive strategy to address poverty in Philadelphia, led, of course, by Eva Gladstein and her team over at Community Empowerment. That plan was a part of our effort to not only reduce poverty, but also was a component of our very successful Promise Zone designation application, which, of course, you now know that we won. We created a graduation coach campaign to provide adults with the tools to help young people in their lives graduate from high school and prepare for post-secondary education or training. It literally sounded like what Secretary Foxx was talking about. Maybe his grandfather was the originator of the graduation coach campaign in a different kind of way. Young people need help filling out these forms and understanding what's going on. And so Lori Shore and her team worked to create that through the Mayor's Office of Education. We also created Philly Goes to College to help residents of any age, 18 to 81, and if you're 82, that's all right too, to help you get information about going to college, going to a post-secondary educational opportunity. We have nearly 70,000 people in this city, working people right now in the workforce, who started college and didn't finish. That thing called life may have intervened somewhere along the way and distracted them from the path that they were on. We need to encourage our employers here in Philadelphia, help them to get back on track, which is the reason why we created the Returning to Learning program in our city government. Secretary Foxx, we have 12 colleges and universities that partnered with the city right now to give our public employees a 25% discount for them, a spouse, and dependent children for any course that they take at one of those colleges and universities. We cannot ask... I virtually never ask the private sector to do something that we're not already doing or not prepared to do ourselves. I don't ask folks to do stuff that we won't do first. We created the Benephilly Centers to help residents access the benefits and services they need. Thousands and thousands upon many thousands of people in Philadelphia leave hundreds of millions of dollars of benefits that they are eligible for if they were to sign up for them. Real cash money or credits that help to lower their costs of running their household. Most recently, you know that we had the homestead exemption program. We estimated that over 300,000 people were eligible to get a $30,000 reduction right off the bat from their property assessment. Only about 270,000 people actually signed up. It asked 4 questions. It asked you to sign your name and date the form. And thousands of people have still not returned their homestead exemption, which is right off the top, cash money savings on their property taxes. This past summer, the City of Philadelphia, a variety of departments and agencies combined, put $7 million, the largest investment we've ever made, in our summer jobs program, helping 7,600 young people get a job this summer, which is fantastic. But 18,000 young people wanted a summer job opportunity, and so we still have much more work to do. I've partnered with mayors across the country, in particular Mayor Ms. Landrieu, New Orleans, to create Cities United, focused again that much more narrowly on the issues of violence in the African American community. If you want to talk about stats, here's one of the most chilling stats you're ever going to hear. Black males are 6% of the population of the United States of America. Over 300 million people live in this country. You will find this on page 2 of the My Brother's Keeper Taskforce report to the President. Black men are 6% of the country's population, yet represent 43% of the homicide victims in the United States. For all this talk about disease and disaster and all kinds of other things going on, if black males were ever categorized as we do with non-human entities, black men would be an endangered species in the United States of America. That's how serious an issue we're dealing with here. 6% of the population, 43% homicide victims in the United States of America. We have a lot of work to do. We decriminalized the penalties with regard to small amounts of marijuana. We've changed our relationship with the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency regarding detainer requests. On and on and on. We're doing a lot of stuff. Still not enough. Not enough young men graduating from high school going on to college. Too many young men getting shot and killed on the streets of our city. Last year, we had the lowest number of homicides since 1967 in Philadelphia. Celebrate that for a minute. But 247 people lost their lives. Over 1,000 people were killed. The rates of suicide, which virtually never get discussed, especially in our community, astronomical. These are serious issues that literally take people away from us. That is somebody's son. That is someone's brother. That is someone's uncle. That is someone's nephew. That is someone who is not going to have the opportunity to give us as a city all that their potential has to offer. We have a lot of work to do. And we're charging you here today, of course, with that. Let me get to my other important task here this morning before I completely go off. I'm asking you for your knowledge. I'm asking you for your expertise. We need your help. We have some of the greatest leaders across the country in this room, and some are in our city government. By his peers, our police commissioner has been deemed the best police commissioner in the United States of America. By his peers. He is currently the president of the Major City Chiefs Organization and the Police Executive Research Forum. No one has ever been president of both organizations at the same time other than Police Commissioner Ramsey. And as great as his work is, police department can't do this by themselves. Vanessa Garrett-Hartley is our DHS commissioner, and the work that DHS is doing and transformed an agency that was at its depth, it's at its lowest point that virtually anyone had seen that agency back in 6 and 7 and certainly in 2008. We appreciate all the great work of Anne-Marie Ambrose. But that's a public safety agency that is also transforming young people's lives, keeping families together, fewer kids sent out of state for placement, keeping reunited efforts at an all-time high. But they can't do the work by themselves. Everyone has to be in on this. And so I was at a community meeting some time ago. Young folks were having some conflicts in the neighborhood, and I wanted to hear more about their concerns. They said, you know, Mayor, it's about jobs. I said, I get that. I understand that. Do you think that folks want to work? Yes, they want to work, but they're struggling. They can't figure it out, and they get turned down, and got a previous criminal record, and I've got this problem and that problem and the other problem. Well, outside of public safety agencies, over the last 5-6 years, probably about 10% of the folks who have been hired in our city government have a previous criminal record. Again, I don't ask folks to do things that we're not prepared to do ourselves. We're either going to see people where they are or we're going to see them in a different situation. But we spend 30% of our entire city budget on public safety. Police, prisons, DA, courts, probation and parole. Some folks have made some bad decisions, I get that. They've had some challenges in their lives. But think of what we could do with all of that money. Again, 30% of the entire city budget over in public safety. That's money that we should be using on after-school programs, job training programs, sending over to our schools, helping people with workforce development challenges, the things that Mark Edwards and his team are working on. There are so many other things that we can do. And so I said, I want a program. I want to create a series of programs that when I'm out, if I'm riding down the street and I see 6 guys standing on the corner doing whatever it is that they're doing, that I can roll up with my car, jump on out, hey, how you doing? Hey, fellas, what's happening? What's going on? Anybody want a job today? Anybody want to work today? And I don't expect that folks are going to shoot their hands up because they got their boys nearby and all of that pressure and et cetera, et cetera. But somebody out of that crowd is going to think about that night. And away from the fellas, they're going to say, well, what was the mayor talking about that job thing? Let me go check that out. So you read about Philly Future Track, rather. Fast Forward is another program. Philly Future Track, there was a story about a couple folks who are doing survey work now for the streets department. We created the Philly Future Track program. Clarina Tolson, who used to be the streets commissioner, worked on that. She's now the revenue commissioner. Came up with that program. Those young people are doing work in neighborhoods, making the city better, getting an education, and are now the folks that we look to for jobs with the city of Philadelphia. That's what we're doing. So I go to a lot of events, I speak at a lot of programs, I get to introduce a lot of people. It is with tremendous personal pride that I get to introduce somebody today. And all I've asked him to do is tell his story. I said to him this morning, after he tells you his story, this will ring that much more true. I said, Juan, I bet 3 years ago you didn't think you'd be sitting next to the Secretary of Transportation and the Mayor of Philadelphia at a program and that you're going to speak at. No pressure. Out of the first cohort of the Power Corps PHL program, which is another program we created to help young people who have had some challenges in their lives, may have made a mistake trying to get themselves together. It's an AmeriCorps program. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the microphone Juan Jeffries.
My name is Juan Jeffries. I am a vocational school intern for the City of Philadelphia's Water Department, and I'm a proud alumni of RISE and Power Corps PHL. As an intern at the Water Department, I am learning new things every day from my coworkers. Everyone I work with invests their time in me so that I can understand the purpose of being an electrician. They pour all their knowledge out freely and challenge me to make sure that I understand what I need to know to be successful. They treat me like family. Having a career with the Water Department is important to me because there are so many opportunities to grow into what I want to be. Right now, I want to be a plant supervisor. But once I accomplish that, I may want to reach even higher. Working for the City of Philadelphia means that there will be new ways for me to grow in my career. My family loves the fact that I'm sitting down, taking my time to do what I need to do. Everyone looks up to me. When I'm in my uniform, people in my neighborhood ask me about it all the time, and I'm proud to say that I'm a part of the Philadelphia Water Department, providing clean water for the people in my community, and I can tell that they want to be in that same position one day. I would not be here today if it wasn't for the help of RISE and PowerCore PHL. The staff at these two organizations weren't worried about my past. All they saw was my potential. They cared about me as a person. They cared about my success. They filled me with motivation and provided me with the things I needed to move forward in my career. Everyone I worked with shared a unique piece of advice or a valuable resource. I've made my share of mistakes in the past. I'm far from perfect, but I've chosen to learn from my mistakes and turn a negative situation into positive ones. I want to be a positive force in my community. Being involved with RISE and serving as an AmeriCorps member with PowerCore PHL helped me build the skills that I needed to open up new opportunities. I received real job training, resume building support, and a chance to improve on my communication skills. Thanks to these experiences, I feel like I'm prepared for any job. Well, while in PowerCore, I had to make a plan for my life, to think about what I wanted to do over the next 10 to 20 years. I've learned how to break down big goals into smaller ones and how to accomplish them step by step. Before doing that, I never saw myself as a college student. Now I realize that if it can get me where I want to be, I'm all for it. Today, as a part of my internship, I am a student at Community College of Philadelphia. I am building my writing and math skills so that I can be more ready for more advanced roles in the water department. While learning all I could at RISE and PowerCore, I had to do my part by giving space to some friends and surrounding myself with positive people. Hopefully someday I can go back to those friends and help influence them to move towards the positive path. Finally, it's a great feeling to have the support of my family. They are the strongest supporters of all my accomplishments. I'm glad I can put that joy in their hearts. I especially want to highlight and thank my father. My father has been with me since day one, and he's my greatest supporter and my role model. I know I fell short at some times, but he's always stuck by me. All he wanted to see was for me to be successful, and I never want to let him down. I hope the experiences that I've shared with you and the kinds of things that helped me get to where I am today will inspire the efforts to make Philadelphia a more motivating and supportive city for young men like me. I know I am ready to be a positive influence on the next generation and to accept the challenge of being my brother's keeper. Thank you.